Okay, so the economy as a whole is essentially the same as perfect competition. So we take the kind of key things. We said one thing that we care about is economic growth. Growth primarily comes from either investment or innovation, and the point about monopolistic competition is that, like perfect competition, there are no abnormal profits in the long run. So therefore, there are no funds for investment, particularly, and no funds for kind of research and development, innovation, and so on and so forth. Therefore, growth may well be slower than it might be in a market structure like oligopoly. Similarly, if we look at the current account of the balance payments, you look at the big exporters. They tend to be kind of major producers. The sort monopolistic competition. You got tiny little firms. Again, they're going to struggle to compete with the likes of Amazon and Apple, on world markets. So again, we're saying that monopolistic competition, they lack scale. So that's going to make it very hard to compete on world markets, which is likely to damage the current account. We talked about the government's finances. Again, we're saying that there's no abnormal profit. So the direct contribution to that, they're going to be paying very little in the way of either corporation tax or, for smaller businesses, often they pay income tax. But either way, they're not making huge amounts of money here. Therefore, again, it's not going to be great for the government finances. So it's not great for growth. It's not great for the current account. It's not great for government finances. But it's likely that prices are going to be reasonably flexible. So it is, although it's not as competitive as perfect competition, it is a competitive market structure. So therefore sticky prices are unlikely. And like in perfect competition, that means that so therefore kind of self-stabilization is more likely to be able to happen. Self-stabilization is more probable in monopolistic competition than it might be, say, in oligopoly. So it's kind of a relative tick on that one. But more generally, then, what do we think about monopolistic competition? What we're saying then is it doesn't sound that great so far, but if you stand back from it a bit, then in truth, this is what a lot of the service sector in the UK is based around is monopolistic competition. You look at your hairdressers, your restaurants, your taxi firms, a lot of the kind of small level plumbing, electricians, a lot of the small level services that you're using are produced under conditions of monopolistic competition. Because they're just, although we're saying there aren't economies of scale, I mean, that's because they're not really possible. You don't really get economies of scale, particularly in the funeral services. So it's a difficult one to evaluate to some extent, because a lot of the evaluation comes from the kind of qualitative side of things. Done right, monopolistic competition gives you that personal service, because it is often the service sector. You got a personal relationship with your hairdresser, or with your accountant, or with your lawyer, with your plumber, with your electrician, and perhaps with your local garage, and so on. That it's very difficult to kind of put a quantitative it is not allocatively efficient onto it. And therefore, although prices are higher than they would be in perfect competition, maybe consumers are willing to put up with that. Maybe indeed they're happy with that. They're happy to pay a little bit more for that sense that they're getting a personal service, that they're getting their needs and wants met more precisely than they might be in one of the other market structures. In other words, partly because monopolistically competitive businesses are small, maybe the owners have to care more about you as a customer, and therefore maybe in monopolistic competition, in spite of its drawbacks, maybe it is a market structure that consumers value. Look at France. They're always kind of up in arms about the death of kind of small bakeries and small delicatessens and so on and so forth, because although they're expensive, the French value that kind of personal service and kind of unusual, idiosyncratic, kind of individual type of products that they might get in monopolistic competition, even though they're not innovative in the long term. They're providing variety and choice in the short term, and maybe that's enough.